Welcome to my permaculture project. My name is Brian. We have an up-and-coming commercial worm farm that we've been working on incrementally for a while. The worm farm was neglected. We were ramping up our marketing of goat and lamb meat. We have a monthly subscription where we sell a fixed number of pounds each month to people who subscribe to our meat services. And that took quite a lot of time to market our animals. I'm kind of a one-man band when it comes to the operation. I do have a partner who works on the tech side. So we did have the worms on an automatic water timer, and the beds were getting watered automatically, but then at some point the timer got disrupted, and a bunch of the worm beds dried out, and a bunch of the worms died because of that. We're working to get it back into working order, and we've got some big improvements that we're planning going forward. We use these IBCs for worm beds. You can see these big giant metal cages. These are 1,000-liter bins, and they're meant for transporting liquids, and so the cages are really strong and sturdy. People put liquids in them and drive them on a truck or whatever. We decided they might make a decent worm bed. And what we do is we're filling the beds about a quarter full with worm bedding. And then we're using the worm bedding for growing out worms and extracting the castings. And it turns out the way that we had things set up was not a very good setup. We were only using the lower quarter of the bin to grow worms, and the rest of that was basically empty space. It was difficult for us to get in and access the bedding. It's a big, tall bin. It's about 4 feet tall, so we couldn't get in there to access the bedding. We couldn't check the pH easily. We couldn't check the moisture. We couldn't easily feed the worms. Just climbing in those bins was a terrible nightmare. They're tall. It made it hard for us to maneuver around the bins. Moving around the bins with a hose or something is super restrictive. Trying to get in there with rakes and shovels and everything is also highly restrictive. So we decided to cut off the top halves of the IBCs. And this is what you're seeing in this video, is this transformation of after we cut off the top halves of these IBCs, you'll see it really opens up the space and improves the aesthetics. And it doesn't just improve the aesthetics, it also improves the access, it improves the mobility of us moving around in there with tools. It'll allow us to get a wheelbarrow in there. And so my partner has this really interesting insight, and this is not his original phrasing, but it's his original insight, which is function follows form. And we're used to hearing that the other way around. We're used to thinking form follows function. But really, what my partner's insight was this idea that if you have an operation that's nicely organized, it's well maintained, it's got a really nice aesthetic, then you're basically going to be able to run that operation really well, really efficiently, and you're also going to be able to build functional, repeatable systems on top of that really nice, organized, aesthetically well-designed operation. And so that's the sense in which function follows form, is that if everything's really nicely laid out and organized and maintained, then you can build a lot of functionality on top of that design. And that's the goal that we had in mind with this redesign of cutting the worm bins in half, giving us lots of space in between the bins, and making the changes that you're seeing here in the video. So I've been setting up the bins in this really nice arrangement here. I've got the bins laid out long ways like this with these really nice walkways in between. This is plenty of space to get a wheelbarrow through. This one kind of sticks out because I've got this pole here, but I'm going to move that up against the pole as best I can. That'll give me this really nice walkway. Well, I do have these bins here that I need to turn, and so these bins have a bunch of compost in them, still pretty moist, and I'm having to scoop it out into another bin to lighten the load so I can turn it by hand. Well, as I'm scooping, I am seeing quite a few worms. They've kind of disappeared at this point, but there we go. Worm there, little guy there, and probably some in here. So I'm optimistic because I did look at how much it was going to be to purchase more worms, and I noticed that worms are quite expensive these days. So I am basically going to try and regrow our worms from our existing stock and just treat them with utmost care and give them some really good food to feed on, and that'll increase their numbers dramatically in a short period of time. And we have to wait until our wood chips get composted down anyway, so we do have some time to rebuild the population. We have a bunch of compost around, and most scoops out of a lot of these bins had worms in them, so we're doing quite well on the worm front, I'd say, relative to how I thought we were. And yeah, once I scooped out all those scoops, I was able to get everything lined up, move everything by hand, as you saw in the video. So yeah, let me just give a full view here. You can see kind of a side-by-side of how it looks now versus how it looked before, and I think you'll agree, this is much, much more functional. And I'm just so excited to get in here and start producing some worm castings.